rain, come storm, come snow, or the heat of the sun, we run for shelter and thank our stars for having a roof over our heads. Of all the things in our daily lives that are absolute necessities, the one thing that we take for granted is the roof. You just expect it to be there, and that's that. But it hasn't always been that way. For there was once a time when in order to have a roof, you first had to find yourself a cave. Now, caves were fine, up to a point. But if you were the kind of person who liked creature comforts, you were bound to feel that there must be some better means of having a home for yourself, if you just knew how to do it. For some strange reason, history does not record this fact. But away back in the ancient Stone Age, there was a very ingenious caveman who hated caves, but also hated to get wet. And for that reason, he invented a roof. The reason he didn't invent a raincoat was because in those days, clothing was the least of a man's worries. And the reason he didn't call his invention an umbrella is because a roof was more important. The fact of the matter is that he didn't know that he had invented a roof at all until his girlfriend and wife-to-be found that it was a lot more comfortable to live under the shade of a lean-to than to be holed up in a dark, stuffy cave. All of a sudden, roofs became popular, and the next thing you knew, there were no cavemen. This was a big help to society because what with the population on the increase, people were beginning to run out of caves. Moreover, whereas man used to have to stay in one place because he couldn't take a cave with him, he was now free to set up housekeeping wherever he wanted. There was only one inconvenience about this type of construction. Sometimes you were forced to move when you least expected. So, over the years, quite a lot of improvements were made to roofs. Instead of lightweight palm fronds, thatch was used, and straw mixed with mud. This last system had one peculiar advantage. After a while, you could grow grass on your roof. Eventually, men came to realize that a roof is a pretty important part of any building. They built roofs of tile, slate, and wood, and gave them all kinds of fancy effects. But for thousands of years, they simply didn't know that a roof can be made to help keep a house cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Well, there was little understanding of the principle of insulation. But eventually, plain common sense led men to figure that just as clothing helped to keep their bodies warm, so too would layers of materials installed around the shell of their houses serve to act as a buffer against the weather. As styles in architecture gradually changed to reflect the needs and tastes of the people, it became the vogue to build houses with high-pitched roofs and large attics. But the need for summer and winter comfort remained. Consequently, when suitable materials for home insulation began to be manufactured, there was ample space in those houses for installing them in attics and sidewalls. Thus, for the first time, it was possible for man scientifically to engineer a greater degree of comfort into his home. But even as this occurred, big residences with many rooms had become too expensive and difficult to maintain. Household help was hard to get, and fuel costs had risen. The trend changed to more modest-sized, compact, easy-to-care-for houses. But though the smaller houses were easier to keep up, they didn't provide the complete livability that the public desired. The trouble was that they were, in effect, merely scaled-down versions of bigger houses, just smaller rooms and smaller living areas. And the result gave one a compressed feeling of being closed in and cramped. So architects began to develop concepts of an entirely new approach to small houses, to open up areas so as to give a feeling of spaciousness. Large picture windows took the place of little ones to brighten rooms and give a vista. By eliminating interior partitions, the living room, dining room, and kitchen were integrated into one spacious family room. Glass above interior partitions and under the roof, above exterior walls, brought more light and cheerfulness to all the house without invading on privacy. Much of this new trend in house design had its origin in California, where the opportunity for indoor-outdoor living inspired architects to design houses with large expanses of glass that could be opened to utilize terraces, patios, and lanais as integral parts of the living area. To accomplish this, departures had to be made from traditional types of construction, and in particular, roof designs had to be simplified. Yet, though the appearance of roofs seemed more simple, a major problem in construction was encountered. Pitched ceilings to give extra room height were most pleasing when supporting beams were left exposed, as this gave an appearance of greater spaciousness. Incidentally, open beam construction was in itself not new, as for centuries it had been used in the most costly castles, mansions, and houses. But in these modern houses with no attics, how was it possible to provide adequate insulation up under the roof without going into complicated and costly construction? Thus, for a period of time, this beautiful, functional, clean line style of architecture was limited to more expensive custom-built houses, which dotted the landscape of exclusive and expensive residential areas. But as pictures of these houses were seen in national magazines, we, the public, saw features that caught our fancy and opened our eyes to this new way of living. We liked the clever, practical planning that offered the freedom of indoor-outdoor living, the large areas of glass, the low, long roof lines that make the houses look larger because they seem to hug the ground. We liked the feeling of spaciousness, the convenience, and most of all, the complete livability that these houses provide. So, as always happens when the American public expresses its demands, something was done about it. Far-sighted home builders who were quick to recognize the advantages of this new style retained top-notch architects to incorporate all of its better features in houses that could be brought within the reach of home buyers everywhere. But in order to achieve this goal, which was so dependent on roof design, it was necessary to obtain a product that would reduce the costly materials and labor that had heretofore been essential to this open beam type of construction. What was needed was a single product that would insulate the roof, provide a beautiful interior finish, and possess strong structural characteristics. For many years, builders had found that the large, easily handled panels of insulating board sheathing go up quickly with a minimum of labor, cut and fit with practically no waste, give bracing strength to the entire structure, serve as a base for exterior finishes, retard temperature changes because of the highly efficient way in which the millions of tiny air cells entrapped within the board function as a thermal barrier. It may have been the direct descendant of the prehistoric inventor of a roof who quite recently hit upon the brilliant idea of utilizing the proved and time-tested qualities of insulating board sheathing to develop a brand new product called insulating roof deck. Let's take a look at this material, which is now making it possible for builders to bring within the reach of all a style of architecture, the beauty of open beam ceilings that provides a spaciousness which previously could be obtained only in costly homes. There are a variety of types, all of them made of multiple plies of insulating board, formed in 2 by 8 foot panels with interlocking joints. The bottom side, which is left exposed as a finished ceiling, has a pre-decorated surface that requires no further painting. But the most remarkable feature is that in this single product, we obtain 3 essential functions: a structural roof deck, insulation, and a finished ceiling. A 3-in-1 installation that would otherwise require a complicated and expensive combination of products and manpower to achieve the same results. It is truly amazing that as you stand within the open framework of the house, you can watch the ceiling of the room, the insulation, and the basic roof structure go on in one simple application. Whether the roof line is flat, pitched, or monosloped, the technique of application is the same. The large lightweight panels are nailed directly to the roof rafters or beams. And since each panel covers an area of 16 square feet, it takes practically no time to cover an average house. After the insulating roof deck has been installed, the finish roofing is applied. The insulating roof deck itself provides comfort and protection against the broiling heat of summer sun and the chilling cold of winter, together with distinction, beauty, and a truly modern look. And when you enter a house in which insulating roof deck has been used, you can't help but notice the attractive appearance of the ceiling, or the added height which is given to rooms because of the exposed beams permits long, pleasant vistas, new room perspectives with lightness, airiness, and a sense of openness. But more than just beauty prevails with this new type of construction. Here is a ceiling that helps reduce the noise and clatter in your house, a ceiling that actually helps to control the temperature in the house and to reduce the cost of heating and air conditioning your home. For in our modern homes, the trend now is toward either the addition of a cooling system or the installation of units which will both heat and cool the house. So, no matter where we live, to obtain the utmost of efficiency in these heating and cooling systems, we must have better insulated wall and roof construction to give us year-round protection from all kinds of climate. When you come to think of it, a roof is truly a most important thing. Yes, you suddenly become conscious of how much a roof can contribute to the architectural interest and quality of your house, to your personal comfort, to the beauty of your rooms. In this modern age of scientific wonders, isn't it nice to know that such an old-fashioned thing as a roof has also come in for its share of scientific improvement? Come rain, come storm, come snow, or the heat of sun, this, above all, is the most modern way to have a roof over one's head. It sure beats palm fronds and most anything else that's been over our heads ever since roofs were invented.
Our story should start back before Horace Greeley was first quoted as saying, "Go west, young man, go west." Or he expressed that the first stirring movement began, a movement that was the greatest migration known to civilization. The discovery of gold and the beautiful climate were only a few of the tempting inducements which beckoned Eastern Americans, as well as people from all over the world, to pull up stakes and head for California, the land of golden opportunity. At first, the new settlers cleared the land and built their own homes with the help of neighbors and their own sweat and toil. Many of these were crude cabins, but to the new Californians, it was home, a place of their own under a western sky. Soon, however, crossroads became villages, villages became cities, and cities became huge metropolises. The people came in ever-increasing numbers, and the West continued to grow. The need increased for more and more homes, and the building of a home had finally become so complicated and involved that a single responsibility for the entire process became inevitable. This led to the introduction of the general contractor. Here was a skilled professional who could coordinate all the necessary crafts and sources of supply to build modern homes. Finally, with the ever-increasing movement of Americans to the West, it was necessary for someone to plan ahead. Not only individual homes, but entire communities had to be planned and built. Thus, another new factor came upon the American home building scene, the operative builder. Here is a man of many parts. He must have a good working knowledge of housing market analysis, land development, civil, structural, and mechanical engineering, architecture. He must be expert in building methods, building materials, real estate and commercial law, banking and financing. He delivers the complete housing package in an environment so protected by covenant and zoning that lasting value will be assured. As the operative builder emerged as the dominant factor in the home building industry, he naturally sought counsel in association with others in the same business, not only for mutual aid and protection, but to improve his products and offer greater values to the American home buyer. What better way to follow the growth of the home building industry in the West than through the eyes of such an organization? The place is San Francisco. The date is May 25th, 1936.
Which I believe should be incorporated into our Constitution in the objectives and code of ethics. To develop and maintain within the home building industry a high appreciation of the objectives and responsibilities of home building to fully serve the public. To promote, preserve, and protect the right of home ownership amongst all people. To defend with all our force and might the American way of life, the right of free enterprise and private home ownership. As members of a progressive industry, we encourage research to develop new materials, new building techniques, new building equipment, and improved methods of financing, to the end that every home purchaser may get the greatest value possible for every dollar. This organization should operate without profit, and no part of the income of this association shall inure to the benefit of any individual member. I think that's all right, don't you? I think it should be.
Their aims were high, and their problems were many. But this was a group of hard-working builders with calloused hands, and problems were nothing new to them. Most of these men began their careers in overalls, learning the building business from the ground up. And often, their lessons were learned the hard way. For instance, there was the young builder who had scraped together every cent he could to build a small development of his own. This was during the time that San Francisco was growing out over the sand dunes toward the Pacific Ocean. His idea was to show San Franciscans one of the first completely furnished and landscaped new homes. Everything was ready for the big opening, and the last of his money had gone into advertising. But there was one thing he hadn't counted on. Before this area was fully developed, Mother Nature would sometimes kick up her heels, and the sand would take to the air. The night before the grand opening, it happened. Sand over everything. The lawn, walks, and steps. Even inside on the floors and furniture. In the sink. Someday the sand dunes would be covered with homes, lawns, and plants. And this would never happen again. It hadn't blown like this in months. Why did it have to happen now? But you don't put all your eggs in one basket and then stand by and watch them turn into broken dreams. While the young builder worked with a shovel and broom, his wife worked with a vacuum cleaner and a dust cloth. They worked straight through until 1:30 the next morning. And the effort paid off. The next day, the first house was sold. Yes, these men could all tell stories like that of the young builder. They had faced problems of all kinds. Land problems, legal problems, financial or material problems. But now their one major problem was building enough homes to house the people of one of the fastest growing areas in the world. Just 3 years later, when the original group of 17 builders had expanded to a total of 84, there was a crisis which could affect the entire building industry in America. Congress threatened to discontinue federally insured loans for low-cost housing. The Associated Homebuilders immediately sent their executive vice president to Washington to personally petition President Roosevelt for an extension of FHA. Because 500,000 building tradesmen would be affected by this legislation, 15,000 in San Francisco alone. He argued that FHA regulations should be more favorable to the home buyer and that loans for lower cost housing should be extended. Finally, Congress did pass the bill to extend FHA benefits. The executive vice president of the Associated Homebuilders of San Francisco and Marin was the only representative of the builders of America who struggled to continue this vital aid to middle and low-income families. And the members of the AHB were quick to take advantage of the new FHA benefits. With only 5% of the U.S. population, California builders were constructing more than 20% of all FHA homes. The largest FHA office in the country was in San Francisco, which was now 6th in the nation in building volume. But in September of 1939, something happened that was to change things all over the world. Bombs were exploding and Europe was afire. America had to help her allies overseas. And it was necessary to ship them all the materials and supplies they needed. During the long months that followed, severe shortages again confronted the builders. Once again, the Associated Homebuilders sent their representative to Washington to try to obtain materials necessary to meet San Francisco's increasing demand for homes. But then...
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
We were at war, and the nation immediately went into an all-out war effort. Many members of the AHB and their sons or daughters went into the service of their country. Both men and materials poured into the armed services, and of course, private building at home was nearly at a standstill. priorities, price controls, and hundreds of other problems now besieged local builders who were trying desperately to build homes for war workers. Working under housing quotas, builders faced tremendous obstacles which often threatened to stop or delay even the small amount of housing deemed essential by the government. Here again, the Associated Homebuilders found a new need for their organization, and the AHB fought the builders' fight. Daily liaison with Washington officials, pointing out the problems and the urgent need for quick relief. Daily conferences with the myriad local government agencies regarding interpretations of the endless regulations and directives binding the industry. These became a way of life for the association office. It was during these hectic weeks in mid-1942 that the National Association of Homebuilders was born, the first single organization representing the entire home building industry in the United States. This was a long-sought goal of the San Francisco group, whose far-seeing members were prime movers for such an organization. During the war, more Americans were exposed to the lure of California. They came to work in defense plants or shipyards, or they were stationed here in the service, and they liked it. Thousands decided California would be their home when the war was over. Then in August of 1945, it was over. The most devastating war that civilization had ever known had finally come to an end. And with it came the biggest problem ever to face the Associated Homebuilders. Directly on the heels of the war came an unparalleled housing shortage. People combed the want ads for a place to live. Houses, apartments, and even rooms were almost impossible to find. And materials to build new homes were still not available. When an opening did occur, it was only a matter of hours before the no vacancy sign was out again, and most apartment houses had waiting lists. Hundreds of new families arrived every day. Only the lucky ones had a place to stay. Families doubled up and lived in cramped quarters. And still the people came. Finally, when materials were again available and competent help was no longer an acute problem, Associated Homebuilder members were ready. If automobile manufacturers could build good cars with production line methods, why couldn't houses be built the same way? Home builders designed their own assembly lines. Parts were pre-cut, marked, and pre-packaged. Even new tools were designed and built to speed this new pre-assembling operation. Parts for an entire house were often transported to the site, numbered and marked, ready for assembly. The challenge to the builders was almost overwhelming, as thousands of new families continued to arrive in the Bay Area. It took almost a superhuman effort to keep up with the need for new homes. The cost of labor and materials spiraled higher and higher. The Associated Homebuilders of San Francisco and Marin waged a big battle to hold down the price of homes. For nobody knows better than the builder that you can't build and sell homes at a price no one can afford to pay. Occasionally, someone buys a new automobile right off the assembly line, and he gets a lemon. Well, the building industry was growing at such a furious pace that here, too, someone occasionally got a lemon. A leaky roof, a crack in the wall, or doors that stuck, and the builder usually heard about it in no uncertain terms. The Associated Homebuilders recognized this situation and waged a strong campaign to prevent faulty work. Thousands of homes built by AHB members displayed the A quality sign, guaranteeing quality materials and workmanship. Then, in 1949, came the biggest building year in San Francisco's history. 20,000 homes were started in the Bay Area that year, and the housing shortage began to ease. On the subdivision map, it looks easy. But imagine the problems in moving more than 15 million yards of earth before you can start to build the first home. Imagine the daring and dreaming and work it takes to begin with nothing but a huge gully like this and end up with a beautiful and practical shopping center like this, standing directly on the spot where the gully once was. Imagine how it would feel to have everyone tell you you were crazy trying to build an actual city within a city way out on the edge of town in an area like this. Then to have your dream come true and win national recognition by creating a modern community like this. A dream, yes, but also a tremendous gamble and years of hard work to create homes and jobs for many thousands of people. By 1950, the building industry had become the second largest in the United States. For the first time, homeowners outnumbered renters, and the Associated Homebuilders of San Francisco and Marin had the satisfaction of having met their crisis head-on and whipped it. One of the objectives of the association is to oppose local and national legislation which improperly restricts the home building industry, imposes inequitable burdens upon the homeowner, and threatens the right of home ownership. In Sacramento, the association is represented by a full-time legislative advocate. He is always alert to bills going through the legislature which will affect the builder and homeowner. And on a local level, officials of the Associated Homebuilders regularly attend the meetings of city councils, planning commissions, boards of supervisors. They also vigorously support all sound legislation affecting homeowners and the building industry. Extending and increasing the California Veterans Home Loans was just one example of beneficial legislation which has had the strong support of the association. Down through the years, the building industry has, of course, not been immune to labor problems. One dispute in 1951 held up all building in the area for 2 months. But here again was another useful purpose for the Associated Homebuilders. By using their association as their bargaining agent, the builder members and the unions have settled all labor differences by careful and fair negotiation and arbitration. Another service the AHB performs for its members is the organizing of clinics and seminars. Even though building has now reached a scientific art, members are always looking for ways to improve. Nationally recognized authorities discuss such subjects as financing, design, rental housing, and merchandising. Members learn the most up-to-date methods and new ways to improve their services to the customer. Such meetings take place on a national level at the annual conventions in Chicago, but they often include much that is not of particular interest to Western builders. Therefore, the Associated Homebuilders play a vital part in promoting the Pacific Coast Builders Conference. Here, the members are exposed to all the latest ideas and materials applicable to Western living. Here again, meetings and forums are held to discuss various problems which continually face the Western builder. On the 25th of May, 1961, the Associated Homebuilders of San Francisco and Marin gathered to celebrate their 25th anniversary. They swapped stories. They looked at pictures and news items that brought back memories. They had a good time as they renewed old friendships. Josh Billings, president of the association, welcomed the members to the dinner meeting and congratulated the group on the phenomenal accomplishment of building 150,000 homes in a 25-year period, a record of which any group could be proud. But as Mr. O.R. Dorr of the Pacific Gas and Electric Company told the group, Pausing to look back over the past 25 years was enjoyable and gratifying, but the big challenge still lies in the future. And the future holds many exciting things already taking shape. The co-op apartment, where the buyer does not own his home outright, but he buys shares in the corporation which owns the building. Other new concepts are in the offing. 1961 was the year the ground was broken for San Francisco's first condominium or vertical subdivision. Here the buyer has title to his own apartment. The hallways, elevators, and grounds are much like the streets and gardens in an individual dwelling subdivision. He participates in the building management, and he supports the upkeep and maintenance, but he does not do the actual work. Of course, there will be exciting advancements in style and design of individual dwellings, too. With the decreasing availability of buildable land, the lot sizes will probably become smaller. But the homes will be scientifically designed and equipped with the most modern devices, such as this central vacuum system and many other modern built-ins to make living easier. Of course, home building is a business, and like any other business, it cannot operate without a reasonable profit. But all the profits in building a home are not counted in dollars and cents. There is a real satisfaction in knowing that you, the modern builder of homes, are actually today's pioneer. You start with an idea, or maybe it's just a dream. You gamble on a piece of ground, and you're gambling on a fluctuating money market when you borrow up to the limit. You burn the midnight oil, trying to give the buyer the best value for his investment, keeping your homes competitive in price, outstanding in quality, and still try to make a fair profit. And then, finally, you have created something beautiful and lasting. A credit to your ability and a credit to your community. For new homes mean new people. New people raise the political influence and prestige of your city and its ability to attract new commercial and industrial development. A new subdivision allows the city to extend its legal boundaries, making possible orderly and controlled expansion, and it raises property values in the city. New homes and new people mean increased purchasing power, more business for the local stores and shopping centers. And, of course, more homeowners means a broader base over which to spread the tax load, so that more services can be offered to the citizens of the community. And it is well known that home ownership is one of America's toughest blows against communism. You may not admit it to your friends, because it might embarrass you. But you get a real lift in knowing that you are providing a better way of life for a lot of people. And the greatest profit of all comes when you receive a letter like this, written by a housewife who bought a home from you last year.
And another discovery we've made is the old-fashioned meaning of neighborliness. For the first time, we've really gotten to know our neighbors, and we like them. The feeling of belonging is so important, to be a part of the community and to take part in its activities. Such things as brownies and Little League have brought our whole family into active participation. And then there's the deep-down interest in church. We now have a real feeling of belonging, the feeling that this is our church. Of course, there are so many other things that add up to the wonderful feeling of having our roots down at last.
Well, those first pioneers who came to California may not have had the modern conveniences of today, but they must have felt the same way. So many of them went through so much for that place of their own. America was built and made strong by people like these. A home of your own is a part of our way of life. It's every man's dream. And you who combine your generations of experience, knowledge, and skill in the building profession have the satisfaction of knowing that you are to make that dream come true. Yes, this was once marshland, mudflats, and sand dunes. Mr. Builder, you have done a job.
I'm Judy Harrison, and this story is about one of the sweetest guys in the world, my husband. Like most, he's an average American male, hard-working, a little conceited, thinks he has the best-looking wife in the world, a fact I can't argue with. He's smart, aggressive, and if we keep our fingers crossed, maybe he'll get that raise next week. Like most husbands, he has to be coaxed to take out the trash, and he'd rather discuss grass than mow it. But last week, something happened that brought us closer together and made me realize what a wonderful husband he really is. On Tuesday, I was out collecting for the sun drive with Susie, my next-door neighbor. I started up to the Carter's house, and Susie waved me down and told me not to go in. Ed Carter had just passed away, Sue said. I was shocked. Ed Carter? Why, I just saw him last week at PTA. Poor Mary. And with 3 children. Of course, he had adequate insurance, but what a tragedy. As I went on collecting through the neighborhood that day, I kept thinking of all the things that Mary was going to have to do. She'd have to choose a cemetery, and she would have to select a space. She'd have all the money matters to take care of. All by herself. All alone. I didn't give this too much more thought until after supper when Jim brought the subject up while we were washing the dishes. He said that he'd heard at the office that Ed Carter had died. And he repeated practically the same thing I had thought about this afternoon. We went on discussing Mary and the kids and the funeral, when all at once, it hit us. This could be us. This could be happening to us in our home. We weren't prepared at all. We didn't own cemetery property. We didn't even know anything about them. I don't mind telling you, it was pretty much a shocker to realize that if we didn't do something about it now, one of us would be doing exactly what Mary Carter had to do. How much simpler it would be to buy ahead of time, and we would not have to pay cash. We decided that the best way to take care of this is to do it together.
Yes, Jim and Judy should do this together, just as they selected their home and their new car and all the important decisions of their lives. Jim emphasized that in this case, the decisions were already made for them. It was now just a matter of when. Now, you may think that Judy and Jim Harrison are unusual to be talking about cemeteries in the middle of the kitchen. They really aren't. Thousands of couples all over the United States are making these vital arrangements as part of their fundamental duties to their families. After all, if you will be honest about it, there are only 2 times in a family's experience that they'll take care of this important job. Immediately, while they realize the necessity for it, or at a time of death, which we all know to be the worst time to do it. Modern Americans have begun to realize that this is a decision that they will make only once, and that this decision will last into eternity. These forward-looking couples know that cemeteries of today are designed not for the ones who have passed away, but for the ones who remain, our children and grandchildren, a place where they can come
and remember. In 1959, a study was begun by a group of Memphis businessmen to determine the type of cemetery that most of the people of Memphis wanted. The results of this study showed three primary things. Number one, people wanted to discard the old-type stone symbolisms and statues and build a cemetery that would depict the beauties of nature in flowers, trees, shrubs, lakes, pleasant streams of water providing quiet areas of meditation. Number two, utilize the beauty and agelessness of bronze tablets set flush with the lawn. This upholds the dignity of man in providing equality of burial. And number three, provide some method of purchasing family spaces before the need arises in order to protect the one who remains. With these vital facts guiding them, the businessmen went to J. Duke Moody, nationally known Memphis landscape architect. Their instructions to Mr. Moody were, design a cemetery that will be beautiful and serene, combining the natural beauty of sweeping lawns, tree-shaded paths, running water, and flowers in profusion. Such a cemetery, we feel, will be in keeping with the dignity of man and our democratic heritage. It should be a park of outstanding charm, a place of which the people of Memphis can be proud. But before a blade of grass could be planted, a comprehensive plan for the entire park development had to be completed, showing the exact location and type of trees and shrubs and flowers which would be used in profusion. The effect will be an ever-changing one, varying with the seasons of the year. From the entrance, the perpetual fountain is seen framed with the rich green foliage of magnolia trees. The panoramic view of the lake shows a lovely island connected with the mainland by arched footbridges. The central feature of the island is a beautiful pavilion where visitors can pause to rest and enjoy the beauty of the setting. The lake will be fed by a tree-shaded stream, rippling over moss-covered rocks intergrown with aquatic plants. Natural stone benches will grace the paths for relaxation and meditation. As you can see, every effort has been made to preserve and accentuate the natural beauty of the landscape. In the rear, an administration building is planned. This building is also designed to blend in with the natural surroundings. Adjacent to the administration building is planned a quiet and secluded chapel with an enclosed garden court dotted with luxuriant flowers. To assure that this beauty will be perpetuated through the ages, a permanent trust fund is maintained under the supervision of the Union Planters National Bank of Memphis. 25% of the purchase price of all spaces goes into this trust. The principal can never be touched. Only the interest may be used to maintain the beauty of the park. Of course, this wonderful new idea cannot be built in the twinkling of an eye. Mother Nature requires time to grow trees, time for the blossoming of flowers, time to prepare the soil for the beauty yet to come. Therefore, Eastlawn Memorial Park is being built in sections. As one section is completed, another is begun. In this manner, each section has the same careful and precise planting as the one preceding. When these sections are completed, spaces will be offered to the public for purchase. But in the meantime, a certain amount of advertising and publicity must be done to tell the people of Memphis about these botanical gardens. Normal advertising in newspapers, TV, and radio just doesn't do the job. We think the best way to tell the story of these new gardens is to talk to the people of Memphis in their homes. Sort of a word-of-mouth advertising, If you like it, you'll tell others about it. Also, for those who do like it, we have set up a unique plan. As you know, anyone could come out to Eastlawn and purchase spaces at a time of need in a completed section. But some families, like Jim and Judy, see the need for buying ahead of time. To those who wish to do so, our plan makes it possible for them to purchase at substantial savings. You may select your estate in the section next to be developed. This is good business for you and Eastlawn, as it gives you space at far less than what you would ordinarily have to pay, and it gives Eastlawn a heritage of thousands of property owners telling their friends about the park. If a family should have a death before the section is completed, they may make a new selection in a completed section, and at no extra cost. Also, under this plan, husband and wife have the opportunity to choose the bronze marker together, one that they will both like and admire. One of the nicest things about this plan is that Eastlawn can provide a financial arrangement to suit anyone. You may pay cash or small payments. As a matter of fact, this monthly payment plan appealed to Judy and Jim when the counselor called on them.
Of course, this story doesn't end here. Naturally, we purchased our memorial. But more than that, we acquired peace of mind. We realized that there are only two times that you can take care of this. Now, while in a normal state of mind, when you can choose together, or at a time of need. So it stands to reason that when we had a choice, we chose the most intelligent way. And we chose a cemetery that's more than just a cemetery. It's a garden of botanical beauty, one that we, along with all our friends, can be proud of. Of course, my husband is going to go to work tomorrow and brag how smart he was to buy our memorial estate ahead of time. And you know, I agree with him. He is a pretty smart fella.
Today, in this astral age, jet wings journey into night, further and faster than the mind of man once could imagine. In all seasons, in all weathers, jet wings streak through thin skies to carry the traveler to his easy destination. Terminal, journey's end, or the immense beginning of 1,000 private adventures.
dear daughter, how happy your mother and I are that you and the children are coming to visit. This will be the first time we'll see our grandchildren.
Journey's end, or the immense beginning of 1,000 adventures. In all seasons, in all weathers, jet wings guide the traveler to the private place of his destiny and hope.
Contrails, the long white cloud streamers which mark in the sky the paths of our high-flying planes and missiles. Contrails, familiar trademark of the United States Air Force, and a fitting backdrop for stories about the men and women who make it the heart of American aerospace power.
The Air Force Dictionary defines astronautics as the art and science of flying through space, or sending winged guided vehicles or missiles through space. Definitions have to be concise, but that one is certainly a terrific simplification, because astronautics demands a complete mastery of rocket flight in all its aspects, which in turn requires the application of many scientific disciplines, such as astronomy, physics, chemistry, mathematics, aeronautics, meteorology, electronics, and physiology. It's partly because of this great complexity that astronautics means so much more than just the great adventure of getting off into space and looking around. Space flight will enlarge, improve, and apply mankind's most advanced scientific knowledge and skills. The Air Force, in meeting its responsibilities in this great endeavor, will need the close cooperation of science and of industry under the overall direction of the Department of Defense. Many people, perhaps a majority, look with a cold and skeptical eye on the whole idea. What's the use, they ask? Why space flight? What are the motives? The most important motive of all is this: man's unquenchable will to learn. He is determined to go into space because it is there, and because much is to be learned there. Our planetary family, the Earth and its moon, the other planets and their moons, and the sun itself, all taken together, is a sort of minor, local neighborhood group, not too conspicuously located in one of the outer arms of the Milky Way. Naturally, we take a great deal of interest in the Milky Way because we live there. It's one of those vast spiral systems of stars called galaxies. If we could see a profile of the Milky Way and apply some sort of cosmic yardstick, we'd find our galaxy extending about 100,000 light years. And a single light year is equal to 5,880,000,000,000 miles. Our solar system is about 30,000 light years from the center of the Milky Way, a distance represented by the almost incomprehensible figure of 176 quadrillion 400 trillion miles. We know that the entire Milky Way, of which our planetary system is such a subordinate part, is only one of an untold number of galaxies. There are literally billions of them. As for realizing the dream of manned flight to other stars in our own galaxy and to other galaxies, a trip at 20,000 miles per hour to the Andromeda Nebula, the Milky Way's nearest neighbor among the great galaxies, would involve a flight lasting no less than 76,500,000,000 years. And a flight to our nearest neighbor among the stars in the Milky Way, Proxima Centauri, would be roughly the equivalent of flying around the Earth 1 billion times. In any realistic sense, all the talking and hoping and planning about spaceflight concerns a severely localized effort confined to our solar system. The beginning has been made. The threshold has not only been passed, but left far behind. Balloons, both manned and unmanned, soar to altitudes that are above all but 1% of the Earth's atmosphere and return with much valuable scientific data. Research rockets, instrumented probes fired into space in search of information on radiation, temperatures, gravitation, and space characteristics reach higher and higher altitudes. In early 1958, a research rocket fired from a balloon floating at 100,000 feet reached an altitude of approximately 4,000 miles. In October 1958, the rocket assembly called Pioneer made a 43-hour journey to a region in space about 72,000 miles above the Earth. Military missiles adapted for the purpose have enabled us to continue our program for sending satellites into orbit. Such satellites and research probes are the prime means of teaching us what we need to know about many things, such as the Earth's magnetic field, its extent and intensity, the depth and strength of the radioactive regions in space, the depth and intensity of the Earth's gravitational field, and the size and frequency of impact of micrometeors. Further progress in the satellite effort will develop many new capabilities. With launching facilities expanded to include the west coast of the United States, satellites are fired into polar orbits, and in their successive journeys around the globe, pass over the entire surface of the Earth. These satellites vary in weight from a few pounds to several tons, and serve a variety of purposes. For communications and early warning of enemy attack, as aids to navigation, for weather observation, and for precise mapping of the Earth's surface. Circling the Earth at high altitudes, they can carry telemetering and other equipment which can transmit a wide variety of new and highly valuable data. To continue the research rocket program by sending one to the vicinity of the moon is another step in the progress of spaceflight. By one possible method, the space vehicle for the moon shoot is a multiple-stage rocket assembly. The first stage being a modified military rocket with a tremendous thrust. The second stage is a smaller rocket. Then the still smaller third stage. And last, the payload rocket carrying the instrumented probe, which is equipped with a retro or braking rocket. At the time of the shoot, the moon is about 226,000 miles away, nearing its closest approach to the Earth. It's just beyond the new moon phase, so its far side is well lighted in a good position to pose for its picture. To allow for the moon's travel in its orbit during the journey of the probe, the launch angle from Earth must be such as to lead the target a considerable distance. After boosting the probe to about 25,000 miles per hour, the bottom stages drop into the sea. Many hours afterward, the instrumented probe, the final stage, is here. By radio, it's been sending back valuable data on space particles and on the Earth's magnetic field. At this time, the moon, orbiting around the Earth at more than 2,000 miles per hour, is positioned here. The probe, slowed by the Earth's gravity, is now coasting, and the moon has reached this point in space. The Earth's gravitational pull on the probe is weakening, but about 200,000 miles out, the moon's gravity takes over and accelerates the probe. A radio signal from a point on the Earth nearest the moon now triggers a braking rocket, which again reduces the probe's speed. The moon is now approaching the rendezvous point. The probe is now in a correct position for its instruments to obtain a picture of the moon's farther side. The moon shoot reminds us that our probing of space has been made possible by the long-continued development of military missiles. Satellites not only carry instruments for recording and transmitting data on space conditions, some of them contribute to the Man in Space program as they carry small animals for the observation of the effects of spaceflight on living organisms. A really big further step, the manned capsule satellite. The capsule is large enough to contain a man, his supplies, and his equipment. The capsule is launched by a powerful multi-stage rocket. Minutes later, the capsule is automatically separated and goes into orbit. After accomplishing its mission of reconnaissance and space research, the capsule is positioned for re-entry and the retro rockets are fired. As the capsule re-enters the atmosphere, its blunt configuration aids in deceleration. A drogue parachute is deployed to reduce the speed of descent. The primary parachute then slows the capsule to landing speed. With further progress requiring that we send a man into space, a new series of problems arise, for the man is not expendable, and we must be able to get him back safely. During test flights, we must find out just how a man will fare under space conditions. A rocket research aircraft with a pilot aboard is carried aloft by a jet bomber and then released. It goes into a steep climb, and on reaching maximum altitude, 100 miles up or more, the pilot is subjected to some of the conditions of spaceflight, such as weightlessness. And on his descent, his reaction to G-forces during deceleration. At this stage of the flight, the various problems of re-entry are under observation and study. Another step in carrying out the concept of sending a man into space is the orbiting spacecraft. It's boosted off the Earth by the powerful first stage of a rocket assembly. Already at extremely high speed, the final stage, carrying the pilot, fires its own rocket and soars into space. It can go into controlled orbit around the Earth, an effective military spacecraft for reconnaissance or for missile firing. Its mission performed, its aerodynamic shape permits it to glide to a landing. After demonstrating that man can be protected and can survive in space, the next requirement will be to establish a manned space station. How is this huge manned satellite with its many useful purposes to be achieved? And what will it be like to be a member of its crew? These men have been chosen for training as part of the crew of the space station. This is a briefing on the whole operation, including the conditions they'll face in carrying out their mission. First, a demonstration of the spacesuit. This is what they'll wear up there while they're putting the station together and whenever they have to go outside into space. There isn't much atmosphere out there where they're going. They'll have to take along their own so that their suits and helmets can be pressurized and air-conditioned to permit normal breathing. They'll have this anchor cable to the ship while outside it, and the cable carries a telephone line to the earphones so that the men inside the ship can talk to them. So much for the suit. Now let's consider how we're going to get them up there. For the manned satellite operation, we'll have multi-stage rockets. The first stage fires for only a short time, but the thrust is enormous. At an altitude of about 25 miles, the first stage drops off, and the successive stages continue accelerating to get above the atmosphere as quickly as possible. The firing of the final stage puts the vehicle into an elliptical orbit. So far, everything has been automatic, programmed into the ship before takeoff. Now, by applying further power at the proper time and place, the ship is put into a circular orbit at about 300 miles altitude. It is now coasting without power. It is in a state of free fall, and the crew is experiencing one of the occupational hazards of the spaceman, weightlessness. Everything tends to float about. And as the assembly of the space station progresses, the crew will learn to use their muscles in new and unfamiliar ways. To maneuver in space, a man will use small rockets placed so that he can move in any direction, but their force has to be applied to the body's center of mass. The men, the ships, and the components being handled are all in orbit around the Earth at the same speed, about 18,000 miles per hour. The work is being carried on in a strange and hostile environment. Cosmic rays and other ionizing radiation, harmless at low altitudes because their energy is filtered out by the atmosphere, up here have high energy and are damaging to living tissue. Because of this, each work period outside the ship will be limited. Direct radiation from the sun will raise the temperature of anything it strikes to several hundred degrees unless reflecting surfaces are used. And any object in space not so exposed will sink to temperatures far below anything ever experienced on Earth. It'll be dark up there. Everything is surrounded by a black void except objects in the direct rays of the sun. One should never look at the sun with the eyes unprotected. It will be a disk of unendurably white light set in a jet black sky. Another occupational hazard in space, meteors. They're generally small bits of rock or metal, ranging from extremely fine dust to about the size of buckshot. The crew will have to be prepared to repair any damage they may cause. They'll load the partially completed space station with oxygen and other supplies. Then part of the team will remain and the rest will return to Earth. Descent into the atmosphere will be made possible by the use of retro rockets to reduce speed and by the vehicle's aerodynamic braking devices. And with the space station in operation, logistic rockets will supply food, fuel, water, and oxygen. The space station will have several kinds of usefulness. Mapping of the Earth's surface from this high vantage point will be more accurate and more complete than has ever before been possible. The meteorologist in the crew, from his observations of conditions in the Earth's atmosphere, will make possible worldwide weather forecasting. Data on cloud patterns and coverage, general circulation of the atmosphere. The location and movement of hurricanes and other storm patterns are radioed to stations on the Earth. In observation of weather systems, a space station can do the work of many satellites. Astronomical observers on the space station will not be hampered by the blanket of atmosphere that has always been a handicap to earthbound astronomers. More precise calculations can be made of the positions of the heavenly bodies and of the distances between them. And the planets will be much more clearly visible than from the Earth. Reconnaissance of unfriendly countries will be possible on a vast scale and will be of definite value to our national security. Launchings of rockets into outer space from the space station will require far less thrust than launchings from the Earth. For instance, one way for men to go to the moon will be from the space station. The moon vehicle need not be streamlined because there is no air resistance to be overcome. It can be built for efficiency and comfort in any desired shape. It carries a crew of several men. After takeoff from the space station, piloting is automatic. Navigation has been programmed into the vehicle's guidance system. After the necessary velocity is attained, the rockets are shut off. Now comes about 2 days of free flight. At about 200,000 miles from the Earth, the moon's gravitational field becomes predominant. Soon after, the crew, through their telescopes, see it as if it were only a few miles away. They begin to examine the landing place that they selected before the trip began. The navigator, using fixes of Earth, Sun, and stars, maintains constant check on the vehicle's speed, position, and direction. In the terminal phase of the flight, he could override the automatic guidance if necessary. Now comes the deceleration phase, and the moon ship slows down, not far above the chosen landing place. Then the ship, after directional correction, is guided to the moon's surface, and the flight is completed. Moon exploration will seek answers to questions such as these. If there is any atmosphere on the moon, what does it consist of? If there is a dust layer on the moon's surface, as is probable, how thick is it? What is the character of the moon's substance? Are the moon's craters of volcanic origin, or were they formed by the impact of meteors? Will our instruments discover the presence of metals? Answers to such questions will help in the solution of the problem of the moon's origin, and probably that of our solar system. When the time comes for a flight to Mars, the takeoff of the spaceship could be from a space station. At a time when the Earth and Mars are in the correct relative position, the rocket ship will move outward from the Earth's orbit. After a flight lasting about 8 months and a half, the vehicle will approach Mars, which is in orbit about 35 million miles outside the orbit of the Earth. On a later flight, a landing may be attempted, but on this preliminary visit to Mars, the crew will be content with a close observation of one of the Earth's fellow planets. They will learn whether the long-observed greenish areas are in reality vegetation. Do the famous so-called canals really exist? Is the surface of Mars as smooth as astronomers have thought it? Are there any signs of the existence of living creatures? Venus, nearest to us of all the planets, and about the same size as the Earth, is a familiar, brilliant heavenly body, but it's shrouded in mystery. It is never without its vast cloud cover, and we know little of what lies beneath. It's about 25 million miles closer to the sun than we are, and a spaceship bound for Venus will move inward from the Earth's orbit. When the ship flies around Venus, radar and other sensing devices will penetrate that eternal cloud cover. The crew may now find answers to questions which astronomers have long been asking. What is the character of the cloud cover? How deep is the atmosphere of the planet, and what is its composition? What is the surface of Venus? If there is any land, what is its character? What is its formation? Surrounding and supporting the scientific achievements involved, there is a philosophy that justifies all of the attempts to solve the problems of spaceflight. Man, being man, cannot stop exploring and learning. So he goes into space. The United States Air Force, aware of its responsibility for extending its capability into space and the prevention of war, believes it possible to hope that with new frontiers reaching endlessly before him, man may gain new perspectives on the age-old tribal habit of war, and that the space age will bring a greatly heightened degree of international cooperation and understanding, and thus serve the cause of peace.
Before dawn on the 16th of July, 1945, at Alamogordo, New Mexico, an event took place which was to change the world for all time to come. The atomic age was born. There is no denying that since that moment, the shadow of the atom bomb has been across all our lives. All men of goodwill earnestly hope that a realistic control of atomic weapons can and will be achieved. Meanwhile, good sense requires that all of us prepare for any eventuality. But wisdom demands, too, that we take time to understand this force. Because here, in fact, is the answer to a dream as old as man himself, a giant of limitless power at man's command. And where was it science found that giant? In the atom, a particle so infinitely small that it takes over 100 billion atoms to make up the hin. Just as other millions and quadrillions of atoms are the tiny building blocks which make up everything in the world. Ships and shoes and sealing wax and cabbages and kings. Although no one has ever seen an atom, scientists have learned a great deal about how they behave. And there are widely accepted theories as to what they're like. Let's start by meeting a leading authority on the subject, Dr. Atom. Now, observing the professor himself, we can see that his structure resembles, in many ways, something almost as vast as the atom is small, the solar system. And there are certain similarities. Here, the sun is the center, and the planets revolve around it. While here, the nucleus is the center with electrons in surrounding orbits. But whereas the planet's movement is like this, neat, orderly, and predictable, the movement of electrons is slightly different. There are other differences, too. Hey, hold it! Thank you. Now, the solar system is held together by gravitation, while the force holding the atom together is electrical. The electrons, which are negative, are attracted by the protons, which are positive, and vice versa. But here in the nucleus are other particles with no electrical charge, called neutrons. Very important characters, too, as we shall see. And equally important when it comes to atomic energy is what scientists call the atom's binding force. It's a kind of cosmic glue holding the nucleus together. This, then, is a single atom, but certainly not all atoms are alike. There are, in nature, more than 90 basic elements, which is science's term for families of atoms. To scientists, the atoms of the individual atom families, or elements, are identified by number, that is, the number of protons or positive charges in their nucleus. And they vary all the way from hydrogen, which has just 1 proton, to oxygen with 8 protons, to gold, he's rich with 79, finally on to the heaviest of all natural elements, uranium with 92 protons. Now, within each element, or family of atoms, there can be different members, each one having the same number of protons, but differing in the number of neutrons. The total of an atom's protons and neutrons is its atomic weight. Thus, in natural uranium, we have U-234, U-235, and U-238. These different members of the same element or atom family, science calls isotopes. Some elements, tin for instance, have a great many isotopes. Others, like aluminum, are lone wolves with just 1. Now, most atoms of most elements are content with their lot in life. We speak of them as being stable, but others are busy day and night, being what science calls radioactive. Like radium, throwing off powerful rays along with some of its neutrons and protons, until it actually alters its own nuclear structure and changes to another family, and then to another, until it does become stable at last. This spontaneous changing of elements is called natural transmutation. Its discovery gave men of science an idea. If an atom could change itself, why couldn't man change an atom? Using as bullets the very particles which radium threw off, a noted British scientist bombarded nitrogen and converted it to oxygen. In terms of individual atoms, this is what happened. The radium nucleus threw off an alpha particle consisting of 2 protons and 2 neutrons. One of the protons was absorbed into the nitrogen nucleus, turning it to oxygen. This was artificial transmutation, man changing the elements. From that first experiment, others by the thousands followed as scientists devised ever more powerful particle accelerators, commonly called atom smashers, to transmute more and more kinds of atoms. All scientifically important, but hardly world-shaking. Then, in 1939, some scientists were experimenting with transmutation of uranium. What would happen, they wondered, if they fired a neutron at a uranium nucleus, already the heaviest in nature? Why not try? So they tried. And the result? Nuclear fission. Instead of a minor change, the atom split in 2. Truly a discovery to change the world. For what had happened when the uranium atom split was a kind of double miracle of science. Half of the miracle concerned that binding force we spoke of before, that kind of cosmic glue which holds the atom's nucleus together. We still don't know all about that binding force yet, but we do know it is equivalent to mass. Therefore, we may speak of it as having a kind of weight of its own. Now, the 2 atoms into which a uranium atom splits also have binding force. But for some reason, it takes less of that glue to hold them together, and in the process of fission, a tiny fraction is left over. What happens to it? It explodes as energy, proving Einstein's theory that mass and energy are really the same. But we spoke of a double miracle. To understand the second one, let's slow down that fission 1 million or so times. A single particle starts the reaction, splitting the uranium atom. Here now is the release of energy as heat and blast. Here are powerful rays being given off, similar to X-rays. But here are free neutrons driven out with tremendous speed. And provided there is sufficient U-235 present, what science calls a critical mass, those neutrons bombard other uranium atoms, causing them to split and split still others. The result? A chain reaction. Over 1 million billion atoms exploding within 2 seconds. And the force? It would take Yankee Stadium full of dynamite to equal the energy released in the complete fission of an amount of U-235 the size of a baseball. With this discovery, at the time the free world faced a war for survival, it was little wonder the first thought was a weapon. But how to obtain enough material for even a single bomb? Only a small fraction of natural uranium is the U-235 isotope, which will fission in a chain reaction. And to separate enough U-235 quickly enough seemed all but impossible. But the impossible became reality as industry, labor, science, and the military combined their efforts to build Oak Ridge, where enough U-235 was separated to build the first atomic bomb. At Hanford, Washington, another impossible project proved possible when a huge plant was built for the mass production of the artificial element plutonium. This process involves what may be called the furnace of atomic energy, the reactor pile. Here is a structure or pile of graphite blocks. In the reactor are placed rods of natural uranium containing both U-235 and U-238. As U-235 begins to fission, the graphite slows down the free neutrons and some of them hit other U-235 atoms, keeping the chain reaction going. But others of those slowed down neutrons hit U-238 atoms. And here's what happens. Remember, we said that U-238 wouldn't support a chain reaction. However, it will capture neutrons from U-235 fission and start a process which converts the U-238, first to neptunium, then to plutonium. And plutonium will fission in chain reaction. Thus, the reactor itself is a source of atomic fuel. Besides producing plutonium, the nuclear reactor makes possible two very important peacetime uses of atomic energy. Remember that the chain reaction process in the reactor creates tremendous heat, which scientists have learned how to control. Thus, a reactor may be substituted in many industrial applications where heat is now provided by coal or petroleum. But such uses in the foreseeable future are limited. For one thing, a reactor pile must be shielded to protect the workers around it from dangerous radiation, and this shielding adds tremendous weight. However, an atomic energy power plant has already proved feasible. The future supplying of electric power to entire cities is far from impossible, while nuclear power in locomotives, submarines, ships, and even very large airplanes may all but revolutionize future transportation on land, sea, and air. But perhaps the most valuable byproduct of the nation's reactor piles is radioactive isotopes. Research has revealed that many elements not naturally radioactive became so when placed in a nuclear reactor. And these isotopes, working as tracers with such measuring devices as a Geiger counter, became invisible detectives, aiding the cause of science in many different fields. In agriculture, isotopes are now used to test such things as the effect of fertilizers on plant growth and the proper timing for their use, helping to assure bigger and better yields from tomorrow's farms. In industry, isotopes have found literally hundreds of new uses, such as the automatic thickness control of sheet aluminum, saving hundreds of man-hours of labor and assuring accuracy never before possible. In the fields of medicine and biochemistry, isotopes are performing near miracles of diagnosis and discovery. With radioactive sodium, doctors are solving more of the seeming mysteries of heart disease and circulatory disturbances. Radioactive phosphorus has been used to locate tumors in the brain and greatly simplify operations for their removal. Iodine-131 finds one of many uses in revealing conditions of the thyroid, and there are many more. New ways of using isotopes are being discovered constantly through the tireless work of modern pioneers in such fields as chemistry, metallurgy, medicine, and biology. Truly, the superpower which man has released from within the atom's heart is not one, but many giants. One is the warrior, the destroyer. Another is the engineer, seeking to provide vast quantities of energy to run the world's machines. Another is the farmer, helping to better feed tomorrow's world. Still another is the healer, helping to diagnose and cure the sick. And the last is the research worker, working on in the fields of pure science to reveal more of the mysteries of the universe. But all are within man's power, subject to his command. On man's wisdom, on his firmness in the use of that power, depends now the future of his children and his children's children in the new world of the atomic age.